Winston Churchill said, "Democracy is the worst form of government, except for all the others." This sentiment is often regurgitated by intellectuals who recognize the many problems with government. They're government apologists, lamenting on the struggle to form a more perfect union. They'll say that a democratic government is better than living under a monarchy. They'll say that we at least have a voice. We can make it better. They'll say that we have it much better than this country or that country. They'll say government and taxation is the price you pay to live in a polite society. It's a necessary evil. Some would argue that throughout human civilization, we've always had government, so we'll always have government. Anytime we become civilized, a government is formed. The alternative would be a mafia-type authority figure. Without government, there would be lawlessness. This argument is essentially that we are better off with government, that the alternative would be much worse. But being ruled by the force and coercion of government or a monarchy is not the natural state of humans. This is very easy to prove. How often do you use force in your personal life to get what you want? Did you force your wife or husband to marry you, or did you try really hard to show them that you'd make a good wife or husband? When you go to work, do you force your coworkers to do your job, or do you voluntarily cooperate with your coworkers to get the job done? Some of you may be thinking that your boss forces you to work. That would be incorrect. Your boss does not physically force you to work. You can quit anytime you want. When I was a boss, I wanted my employees to be as happy as possible. It's expensive and time-consuming to hire replacements. On the other hand, with government, you must pay your taxes, and if you try to quit government, you will be physically forced to pay. The majority of our daily behavior is governed by nonviolent cooperation, negotiation, and social pressures, not violence and coercion. Some might argue that individual behavior is different from the collective, and how my example does not disprove the assertion that throughout human history, we've always had some form of government, whether it be the modern nation state or the monarchy ruled by a king or emperor. This argument is flawed for two reasons. Number one, it assumes that nothing ever changes, that whatever happened in the past will remain so in the future. We, of course, see change every day. Sometimes change is slow, small, and incremental, and sometimes it is dramatic and quick. Number two, if you look at the entirety of human history, most of it was conducted without government. Yale professor James C. Scott supports my assertion. He wrote, "Until shortly before the Common Era, the very last 1% of human history, the social landscape consisted of elementary, self-governing kinship units that might occasionally cooperate in hunting, feasting, skirmishing, trading, and peacemaking. It did not contain anything one could call a state. In other words, living in the absence of state structures has been the standard human condition. The last 1% of human history is approximately the last 2,000 years. You might chuckle and say that you want an example of a stateless society in modern times. There haven't been very many. States and monarchies have run roughshod over the entire planet throughout the past few thousand years. Nevertheless, there have been a few examples. Zomia is a mountainous region in Southeast Asia the size of Europe. The region exists inside 7 different countries, but it is autonomous. The people here neither pay taxes nor obey the laws of the 7 nation-states. It is home to 100 million free people who descended from peoples who left the lowlands, many to flee slavery, conscription, taxation, and religious tyranny. Among the strategies employed by the people of Zomia to remain stateless are physical dispersion in rugged terrain, agricultural practices that enhance mobility, pliable ethnic identities, devotion to prophetic leaders, and maintenance of a largely oral culture that allows them to reinvent their histories and genealogies as they move between and around states. Ireland was also stateless until conquered by England. Anarchopedia chronicles the Celtic Irish society from 650 to 1650. Courts and the law were largely anarchist and operated in a purely stateless manner. The society persisted in this manner for roughly 1,000 years until its conquest by England in the 17th century. Pre-conquest Ireland was not in any sense primitive. It was a highly complex society that was, for centuries, the most advanced, most scholarly, and most civilized in all of Western Europe. A leading authority on ancient Irish law wrote, "There was no legislature, no bailiffs, no police, no public enforcement of justice. There was no trace of state-administered justice. All freemen who owned land, all professionals, and all craftsmen were entitled to become members of a tuath. Each tuath's members formed an annual assembly who decided all common policies, declared war or peace on other tuaths, and elected or deposed their quote-unquote kings. In contrast to primitive tribes, no one was stuck or bound to a given tuath, either because of kinship or of geographical location. Individual members were free to, and often did, secede from a tuath and join a competing tuath. Professor Peden states, "The tuath is thus a body of persons voluntarily united for socially beneficial purposes, and the sum total of the landed properties of its members constituted its territorial dimension." The king had no political power. He could not decree or administer justice or declare war. Basically, he was a priest and militia leader and presided over the tuath assemblies. But what about the law? How did Ireland enforce the law without government? Laws were not changed at the whim of rulers because Ireland was not ruled. But when people voted in an assembly to change them, laws were not created by a clique, as in our time, nor was justice dispensed by a monopoly provider. Parties to disputes were selected from a number of professional jurists chosen for their wisdom, integrity, and knowledge of customary law. Several schools of jurisprudence existed and competed for the business of dispensing justice. Other people, in effect, insurance providers, were independent from the jurists and joined with the party who won the case to exact punishment on the loser. If the loser did not pay, the entire community considered him an outlaw and would no longer engage in contracts with him. As the Irish demonstrated, a stateless society is not a society without rules. It is simply a society without rulers.